All right, everybody. So last week we were talking about flow charts and the relationship to coding. I just want to kind of go over it again. This isn't anything new. It's just kind of a revision of what we talked about before. So you guys have been writing code and writing things where there's decision points and whatnot, and sometimes you may want the user to do something like give an input, or the code, the program might give something out like an output. And we are going to want to, set this up. So what we're going to be doing is using our talk about a flow chart. Okay. So what is a flow chart? Well, the point of this is a bit kind of like when I had you guys, we talked about story mapping, where it's like you take something that's a little bit more complex and you simplify it. Okay. So, when you simplify ideas, it becomes easier to deal with. So, for instance, like Google Map is a simplified version of a GPS, right? If you're trying to get from point A to point B, you're still going a certain amount of distance and all that sort of stuff, but this just makes it easier to kind of look at it. We don't need all the information. We just can simplify it to its bare, its core components of like, okay, we go this street, this street, this street, this street, this street, right? And that's kind of the point of the flow chart, is to kind of map out the key elements of our program. We're not going to get bogged down in specific code. We're not, it doesn't even really have to do with whether it's JavaScript or some other programming language. It's just kind of like laying out like, all right, here are the things that we're trying to accomplish in this program. Here's where we may need information. Here's where the program might make a decision, that kind of thing. Okay. So this idea kind of goes back to 1921. There's this guy named Frank Gilbert who kind of came up with this idea. So when we create a flow chart, we have certain icons that sort of have certain meanings or representations. The first is usually the beginning and the end of a program. That's usually like a circle, okay? Or sometimes you may see it as a rounded rectangle. And that's really just to denote like this is when the program starts and this is when the program ends, okay? There are going to be actions a lot of time. This might mean, you know, adding two numbers to each other, adding tax to something, calling an Uber where the signal goes from your phone to to the Uber network, whatever it is, that's an action. Okay. We can have decision points. Okay. The decision is, if this, then this, if this, then that. Okay. If the user is, um, if the user is running the Uber app from their phone, then, use the built-in GPS within the device to, figure out its geolocation or something like that. Or, I'm sure there's some other ones we can think of, but, those are just some things that are just kind of popping in my head right now. And also there is going to be times where we have input and output. Sometimes the user is going to give information. This could mean like clicking their mouse, or, in the case of a website, clicking on a particular hyperlink or something like that, to give the computer give the program information. The output is when the program will give you information. Okay. All right, so let's do one right now. I'm going to use Figma. You could do this in any program you want. I'm just going to use Figma because it's kind of fast. I could also draw it, but what can I say? All right. Excuse me. All right. So here's the program. All right. We're just going to keep it super simple. Imagine a scenario where you want to create a program that chooses a random number from 1 to 10. After choosing the number, the program will figure out if the number is even or odd. If the number is even, it'll print the word even to the console. If the number is odd, it will print odd to the console. All right. So let's start this up. So I'm just going to start at the top, and it's like, all right, the program starts. Okay. Whether that means like clicking a button or, hitting, loading a page into a browser, I'll just say program starts. Okay. All right. The next thing is I need an action to occur. The action in this case is choosing a random number between 1 and 10. Now, why is that an action? Well, it's not a decision. It's not input output. We are not giving the program a number. The program is coming up with a number. So that has to be done somehow. Probably, when in whatever language you're using, there's some sort of randomized function. Most languages have that. And that would be an action. So I'm going to put that here. Choose a number between 1 to 10. Okay. So next, there's going to be a point where there has to be an evaluation or decision has to be made. What is the decision? Well, the decision is the number even or is the number odd? Okay. So that's kind of the question. How you figure that out, there's a lot of ways we can do this. That maybe your language that you're working with has a function that can do this. There are many ways I can think of using various techniques to figure out if a number is even or odd. So that's going to be, all right. I'm just editing this here. All right. This is where, we are basically making the choice. Is the number even or odd? Okay. All right. So, I'm using arrows to kind of show how the program runs. I like to start top down. It technically doesn't matter. You can go bottom up too. I don't know why that just feels better to me, but it kind of just does. All right. So now it's like, all right, well, what happens? Let's say, for instance, the number is even. Well, that the program's going to print even to the console. That's essentially an output. Um, Output meaning it's giving me as the user information, and that's a parallelogram usually, so it kind of looks like this. I'm just drawing this with a pencil. There's probably another way I could do this, but I'm just kind of lazy, if I'm being honest. All right. So let's say this is the even route, prints even to the console. When I draw the line, I actually kind of like to kind of label the decision in this case, which is, even. This is just so that I can remember what this decision is. And then that's kind of it. So, once it prints to the console, that's kind of done. So I'm just going to kind of repeat this. Program ends. Okay. The other thing is like, well, in an even odd scenario, it's a Boolean, right? It's either one or the other. So, okay, if it's not even, then it's odd. I'm just going to copy all of this. If you're not sure how to do that, check my, my video from last week about how to do basic stuff with Figma. By the way, I'm using Figma, but you could literally use any program you want. I'm just using Figma because I think it's relatively quick. Okay. And after this, the program ends too. So my program would look something like this. Program starts, number is chosen, decide if it's even or odd. If it's even, do this, program done. If it's odd, do this, program done. Okay. The one thing I kind of really want to point out is notice that there really isn't anything about coding like specific, like this could be I could write this in P5. We could do it literally right now, or I could actually write it in many languages. I could write it in Basic, Pascal, COBOL, C++. There's many languages I could write this in. Okay. So the point here that I'm trying to get at is like the point of this is more about problem solving, less about specifically pinpointing one language. So that, this is the one, you look at you can see this is how I kind of wrote it out. Here's one that's a little more complicated. This would be for an ATM machine. Okay, I'm assuming everyone in here is, used an ATM machine. So what's the first thing you do when you go to an ATM? So this is like the start, what's the first thing you do when you go to an ATM machine? Well, it asks you to put in your number, right? Like says, hey, type in your, put in your card and then give me your PIN number. I have actually so much input and output here. I decided to color code it because otherwise it gets like kind of confusing. So in this case, the peach or the tan is when the computer is telling you information. The green is when the user actually gives the program information. So here it's like, all right, we need, there's an introduction, and then we need the PIN number, right? And then the user has to input information, right? You have to put in your PIN number, right? It doesn't just magically appear. Now, the first question really is, okay, did the person, when they put in their PIN number, does that PIN number match the saved PIN number, right? Because if it doesn't, then it basically you have an error, right? And it goes, whoops, sorry, you can't access this. Double check your PIN number, right? And then it goes back to here. If it is correct, meaning the one that I typed in is equal to the one that was saved, then I get to go on to the next step, which is, all right, what do you want to do, right? And there's different, this is a decision point actually for the user where it's like, well, do you want to do this? Do you want to do this? Do you want to do this? Okay. Do you want to, in this case, I'm only going to put, I know that you can do a lot of things with ATMs or whatever, but for now, we're just going to keep it simple, and you can either deposit money, you can look at your balance, and you can withdraw money. Okay. So let's say, they choose the balance. Okay. Well, it's going to display what your balance is. You have X amount of dollars in the bank. And then that's kind of it. I mean, there's really no other actions other than just like literally showing you your amount. But the next kind of question is, well, do you want to do anything else? Or is this the end? Now, you could be done and that's it. You just wanted to look at your balance and now you're done looking at the ATM. Or you do want to do another action and you go back. All right. Maybe I want to do a withdrawal. So, if I choose the withdrawal, the application or the program needs to know, well, how much do you want to take out? There's not, most ATMs don't have a default amount. So it's like, well, do you want 20, 40, 60, 80, 100, some other value, right? So that's something the user has to say. How much do you want? Now, it could be pressing a button. It could be typing the amount in, with a keyboard or something like that. But the user has to do something, right? So the user has to say how much do they want to take out. And then the action is, well, it's going to give you the money, right? Now, in theory, I should have actually put in an extra step here where it actually makes a decision point about whether or not you actually have that much money to take out. So in other words, if you ask to take out $100, but you only have $50 in your account, then it should give you an error message that says, sorry, you cannot, take out $100 or something along those lines. That would be a decision. Does the user have enough money to cover the withdrawal? Yes or no? No, it should go back. Yes, it should, go forward. So let's say that it, did do it did dispense the money the way I wanted it to. The next action is, is that over? Are we done? Or do you want to do something else? That's a decision, right? Now the user has to make that decision. So there should be some sort of button or something that makes that decision to do this or to do this. Let's say they want to do something else, they go back, or that can be it and they're done and no, and then program ends. And the same with deposit. If you're depositing, I know a lot of banks or ATMs kind of can, take in the money if it's cash and they can kind of figure it out, or, they can like scan they scan the check and they can figure out the amount that you're depositing. But let's just hypothetically say our ATM is not that advanced and we literally have to just ask the person how much they're depositing. So we have to ask them as an output. The input is the user has to tell us how much they're depositing, and then we deposit. Okay. And then you can either do something else and go back. Okay. So this is a more advanced one. Let's do one more. I'm just going to do it right now. Let's say I want to, I'm not going to do every possibility. But let's say, oh, I don't know. All right. Let's say I want to log into, let's say I want to send an email through a system like Gmail or something. Okay. So program starts, basically you're entering, gmail.com or whatever you want to do, right? So the first thing it's really going to do is it's going to ask you to log in, right? Almost every email system requires that. So that's going to be a question for me. Where essentially it's going to ask for my username and, login information. Now, if, let's say that they fail, let's say that, there's a problem here. So actually, I'm going to color code this too. Let's make it that if the user is inputting or we're getting information from the program, that's yellow. And if the user puts in information, that's green. So it's going to ask me for information. And then I'm also going to give it information. Okay. Now let's just say, next is the decision point. Does the username match, does, username, password match save version, either yes or no. Now, if it's no, we should probably tell the user that there's a problem. So I'm going to say, okay, if they messed up, let's tell them, username or password was incorrect. Okay. And I'm going to start connecting these. So, we start, have to do a username, or it asks us for a username and password, then we put in a username and password, then we decide if that's true or not. Now let's say that it didn't work. does not match, does not match. Then it goes here. And then I'd probably just go back to here where, they can retype it. So in other words, we're going backwards in our flow chart here. Now let's say they do. Okay, then it's going to take us to like the main page, right? And then on the main page, you can do things like read your emails, compose an email, that kind of stuff. I'm not going to go through like all the things email can do. Let's for now just do two things. You can either let's say we're going to compose an email. Okay. So that's another question. So let's say oops, shoot, I hope that's saved that. Okay, good. What task does the user want to do? Okay. Now let's say they want to, read an email. Reading an email, that's like action, right? They'd have to, read email. So one thing could be, okay, they read the email, there's a new email, they're done, right? Is that it? Maybe. So the question is like, well, are they done or just should they be able to go back and make another decision? So read email. So I'm going to have another question, which is like, all right, do another task, question mark. And if I do want them to do another task, I'll have them go back to here. All right. I'm going to label this yes for task. Maybe they don't want to, and we're done, I don't know, exit program or something, or program done. Okay. Let's say, and I also want to label this. This is the read email option. Let's say the other major option is they can compose an email. So I need them to, type out various things. Like I need them to type out who it's going to. I also need to type out the literal email. So that would also be a user kind of input. Enter email address, like who we're sending it to. And then I need them to actually like literally write the email, like whatever the email is, write or compose email. All right. Um, let's say before they send, I need the program to check to see whether or not there is a email address, because maybe they haven't done that part yet. So, there's a question of, let's move this over here. We'll fix all this later. Okay. Did the user enter a email address? If they did, then great. I want them to send send the program or send the email. That would be a action. And then, I could either do another task or be done. So let's say it's no, we're done. If yes, then, returns back to here. All right. So we are going to put in, let's say that they didn't put in the correct one. We should probably tell them. Warn of failed address, and this would be the this should be yellow because we're telling them something or we're asking for information. All right, so hopefully this gives you kind of an idea of how we write a flow chart. Once again, the point of this is that nowhere in this flow chart did we ever say what specific language we're using or, write any syntax of JavaScript or any other, there are ways of doing these things. And some of them are more complicated than others. But the point is that we're sort of figuring this out. And the point of this is if you're working with a group, you kind of figure out the key actions and the flow of things before you spend a lot of time like worrying about specific code. And the point of this is so that you don't waste time writing code that's unnecessary or duplicated anywhere or anything like that. Okay.